Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim Kaf Zayin. We're going to first finish with our complicated topic from yesterday. We'll do a quick review so that we are ready as we dive into today's daf. So if you remember, we were, okay. So I'm sharing the study guide so you can see it. If you are listening, you should try to have it in front of you. It'll be very helpful. What we had yesterday was a debate. We started actually 2 dapim ago about the Mishna had stated that there was a debate between Beit Shamai and Beit Hillel, which we later learned was also a debate between Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis. The same debate, Beit Shamai holding like the rabbis, or the rabbis siding with Beit Shamai in this case, which is a question of itself, which we didn't deal with, but Beit Hillel siding, or Rabbi Akiva siding with Beit Hillel, about a case where somebody sees, again, it's one makes a vow, including a whole bunch of people, then realizes that there's a person involved there that they wouldn't have ever made a neder for that person. When they get rid of the neder and say, well, it's not applicable to this person, does it cancel out the entire neder or not? To which we had Beit Shammai simply saying in the Mishnah that it doesn't cancel out the whole neder. And we have Beit Hillel simply saying it does cancel out the whole neder. But then we had Raba with a hey and Rava with an aleph, who each had different interpretations of machloket. So I'll say it again, and then I'll kind of review their cases in a bit of, from a different perspective that maybe will also help you remember what they're saying. So let's just go through each of the cases. The cases are where when the person realizes that there was someone, particularly in this case, their father, that they didn't want to include, what did they say? Did they say, I would have used the same language, just said, except my father, or I would have changed my language entirely to have not included my father in any way and said, I would have said so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so forbidden, and my father is permitted. So there's a difference between those two cases, both according to Raba and according to Rava. So let's go through each one. And what we saw yesterday was it doesn't really matter if you start with kulchem and end with kulchem, or you start with ploni and end with ploni. Either which way, if you change your language from one to the other, that's considered a change. So Rabba had said the following: if you started with you're all forbidden, and then you say, well, had I known, I would have said you're all forbidden except my father, everybody agrees that that's not a neder that you canceled part, and therefore the rest is canceled. No, this is a neder where you basically said, I'm just minorly changing one thing and adapting it and excluding my father. And you're really just explaining what you really meant originally. And therefore, actually, there's no neder here that's partially canceled that we would say the whole thing is canceled. You're really just explaining what you meant. Now, obviously, you didn't mean that originally, but you're modifying it. And then there's no machloket in that case. But this is Raba, the first explanation. But if you change your language entirely and said, I never would have worded it in that way, had I known my father was involved, I never would have included him in the statement, all of you are forbidden, and then only after that take him out, I would have just started saying you and you and you and you, and not my father. In that case, there's a machloket because you've changed two things. You've changed your language and you've taken out your father. That's already so much that Rabbi Akiva, Beit Hillel are going to say, that's a neder shutar miksato utar kulo. Beit Shammai still doesn't hold neder shutar miksato utar kulo. He still thinks just the father is going to be permitted. So if we look at this from a different perspective, what we have here is Beit Shammai never holds neder shutar miksato utar kulo, and that's going to be different than Rava, who thinks he does in a certain case. According to Rava, Beit Shammai never holds that way, and there's even situations where Beit Hillel will hold, or Rabbi Akiva, that you could have situations where everyone remains forbidden and just the father's permitted. If we now move to Rava, Rava says he says differently. He says, if you say kulchem and you keep this, well, let's start with ploni, actually. It's easier to start there. If you change the language and you change your father, 2 changes, then everyone agrees, okay, I'm specifically using the chart to help you see, everyone agrees that kulam mutarim. Everybody agrees that everyone's permitted. Why? Because neder shutar miksato utar kulo. That's a clear case, which we just explained according to Raba. It's pretty clear. But according to Raba, it's clear, and that's why there's a machloket there. And that's why that's the case that Rabbi Akiva would say it here. But comes Rava, and he says, no. Even Beit Shammai, even the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Akiva, they're all going to agree here. Neder shutar miksato utar kulo. Because according to Rava, there are cases where everybody agrees that a neder shutar miksato utar kulo against what Raba said. Raba said Beit Shammai never holds that. Rabbis against Rabbi Akiva never hold that. According to Rava, no, they do. It just has to be a case where there's two issues going on. When's the machloket? When does Rabbi Akiva and Beit Hillel hold? When do they hold that neder shutar miksato utar kulo? The whole thing is canceled. But Beit Shamai and the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Akiva don't think so. That's in the kulchen case. If you continue your language and just modify it a little bit, the question is, since you say you're all forbidden, but my father at stage 2, do we go by the beginning of what you say? Or do we say we go by the end of your statement? If we go by the beginning statement, you haven't really changed much. That's Beit Shammai. And they say that's why we're going to keep the kulchem asurim, and just your father's going to be permitted. Comes Beit Hillel and says, what do you mean? Also, bigmar dvarav adam nitpas. People take seriously even the second part of a statement that they make. Remember, this whole thing was talked about in a case where you actually contradict yourself, which is different than here. But since people still take seriously the end part of what they say, and the end part contradicts, this is a case of hutar miksato, hutar kulo, and everyone's going to be permitted. So in that case, there's a machloket. So again, according to Rava, then let's try to take it from a different perspective. Everyone agrees. Rabbi Akiva holds across the board. What I wanted to say here, Rabbi Akiva holds no matter what, neder shutar miksato utar kulo. And Beit Shammai says only when there's two things going on, right? Only when it's really a big change. Minor change, no. Okay? So that's another kind of perspective of looking at it. Now we're going to have a question on Rav. Starting from 3 lines at the bottom of Kaf Vav Amud Bet. Eitive Ravina LeRava. Rabbanit Tanaware, if you remember, we had 2 questions so far on Rava. This is the 3rd difficulty against Rava. So, Rabbanit Tanaware, Yesh Neder, Shemiksato Mutar, Miksato Asur. Here's a Neder that partially is going to be partially permitted, but not fully. Ketzad. Nadal mina kalkila. You have a basket full of figs, and you say, I'm not going to benefit from this basket. Vayuba benot shua, but it turns out it had this really fancy type of figs in there, delicious type of figs. And you didn't know that. And then when you find out that it has these really nice figs inside, amal, right? Imagine, it's hard for us to imagine, right? So, but like, let's say you had, there was a basket of, I don't know, let's say, some sort of candy. And then you didn't realize there was chocolate inside. You said candy, whatever, but I didn't realize there was, Godiva chocolate inside. And it would be like that. So he said, had I known they were in there, I never would have made the neder. What's the halacha? Now notice it doesn't tell you what language he used. That's going to be open to interpretation. First, they're going to assume it was one language, which goes against Rava, and then they're going to answer it was the other language. So he says, so remember, we started with Rabbi Natan saying, this is a neder that's partially undone, right? Partially dissolved, but not fully. So in this case, what will happen? All the figs in that basket are forbidden, but just the benot shuach or mutaro, right? You can just eat the chocolate, forget the candy. Candy you can't eat, you can eat the chocolate. Ad shabar Rabbi Akiva v'limed, until Rabbi Akiva came along and said, what are you talking about? Neder shutar miksato utar kulo. Now, what do we learn from this? Again, as we saw with the previous cases, this is a case where there's a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis. So it would have to be machloket, which you already see if you look at the chart, where Rava says machloket is in which case if you keep the same language. So if this is a question on Rava, it must be the assumption at first is that they switched the language, right? So again, let's read that inside. My lav damal, was it not that he said, Ilu ayiti yodash benot shuach betocha? Had I known there were benot shuach inside here, hayiti omer te'inim shchorot ulevanot asuot benot shuach mutarot. That's the ploni. I would have said. Now this is strange because it's not like you have respect for your father and don't want to include him in what's forbidden. But in this case, right, the language you would have said is you would have chosen that same language. I never would have included the benot shuach at all in the negative. I would have said the black ones and the white ones are forbidden, but the benot shuach, those are permitted. And then what's the case? That's like ploni uploni, where you're entirely changing the language. According to Rava, everyone agrees that hutar miksato, hutar kulo, partially is going to be complete. And therefore, all the figs are going to be permitted, and that's not what it says here. It says here that Rabbi Akiva says all the figs are permitted, but it seems like the rabbis would disagree. To which they answer, no. You could just say, right, I'm sorry, and I didn't finish, okay? Rabbi Akiva, and then it's Rabbi Akiva, uplige Rabbanan, and the rabbis disagree, which is a problem because the rabbis don't disagree according to Rava. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. It's Bo'omel. We're going to go back to the Kulchem case where Rava says it's a machloket, and then it perfectly fits in. Bo'omel, had I known the B'not Shuach were there, hayiti omel, I would have said, kol ha'kalkala asura, the whole basket is forbidden, u'b'not Shuach mutarot, in which case, that's where there's a machloket. Do we go by kol, the whole thing is forbidden, and therefore it stays forbidden, that's the rabbis, or we go by the end, except for the B'not Shuach. Well, since you're undoing the neder, according to Rabbi Akiva, that will undo the entire neder, in which case this works perfectly according to Rava. So it ends up not really being a question, we could say. Now we're going to go to the next question. I'm going to leave it a sheet like this, where you still have the Rava and Rava chart, which you're going to need, and you now have this chart of this new braita. We're now going to say, Man Tana Lahaditanu Rabbanan. Who is the author of this braita? And what we're basically going to explain, we're going to talk about the Reisha and the Seifa. There's two cases, the first case and the second case. First case being the Reisha, the first one, and the Seifa being the second case. And then what we're going to do is we're going to read it both according to Rava and according to Rava. And we're going to have to say, right, obviously it's referring to different cases or different rabbis, different opinions, because again, it's a matter of who says what about the debate. So we're going to explain it both according to Rava and according to Rava. And that will be, you actually wonder whether they brought this in order to allow us to do chazara and review and just make sure we got this all down pat. If I took a vow against 5 of you, okay, I said, I do not want to benefit from all 5 of you. But then I permit one of you, you're all permitted. But if I say except for one of them, then if I say except for one of them, then except for one of you, right, then you'll be permitted, but the rest will be forbidden still. Okay, that will not be neder shutar miktzata utar kula. So the question is, who holds what and what are we talking about? So ila Raba. Okay, so now let's go to the Reisha. The Reisha basically says, hutar to one, utru kulam. Remember, Raba holds, only Rabbi Akiva holds neder shutar miktzata utar kula. So that could only be Rabbi Akiva. And in which case does Rabbi Akiva say it? In the case of ploni uploni. So it would have to be, if hutar lecha mehem, if I permitted one of you, all of you are permitted, then according to Raba, Reisha Rabbi Akiva, it would have to be Rabbi Akiva. And they don't tell you this, but it would have to be in the case where you changed your language. And you said, oh, had I known that one of you was there, I would have said you and you and you, right? And I would have said, but not you. And then according to Rabbi Akiva, what do we hold there? Again, it's a machloket, but Rabbi Akiva holds, you dissolve some of it, the whole thing is dissolved. And that would be, the ratio would be Rabbi Akiva. The Seifa, which says, if I say, chutz me'echamehem, hu mutar ve'enasalim, chutz me'echamehem is when you basically say you're all forbidden except for one. Then, according to Raba, everybody holds that this is a case of not batel kulo, that everyone's going to be forbidden, just that one person's going to be permitted. And Seifa divrei hakol. So the end part is according to everybody. So the Reisha was a ploni or ploni case, and the Seifa was a kulchen case, basically. Again, ploni or ploni being a code word for you change your language completely. Kulchen being you didn't change your language completely, you just modified it, and that's how Raba views it, a modification. Even according to everyone, you're just modifying, and your original neder stays. Ila Rava. Now here they go the reverse order. They start with the Seifa and then they go back to the Reisha. Seifa Rabbanan, okay, which is actually a little easier because our head's right now in the Seifa of the chutzmi. Now, if you say chutzmi, that was the whole machloket in Rava. It's, do we go by the chutzmi part, which is the Gemara Dvarav, or do we go by the beginning part, which is kulchem, which is what you said in the beginning? And that's Beit Shamai and the rabbis against Rabbi Akiva, who don't think that the whole neder is canceled. So when the Seifa says chutz me'echamehem hu mutar ve'henasurin, the whole neder isn't canceled. That's Rabbanit, who holds fos lashon rishon. The Reisha, when it says hutar le'echamehem hutru kulam, That would be, as we thought before, Ploni uploni. And what does Rava say here? Rava with an aleph says, everyone agrees. Even Beit Shamai, even the rabbis against Rabbi Akiva hold hutar mitzato hutar kulo. And therefore, when it says hutar lachamim hutar kulam, reisha divrei hakol. That's everybody's opinion, because as soon as you change your language, everybody agrees that it's going to be, the whole thing is going to be dissolved. So there we have a good review of everything we learned today, or yesterday, of the two different approaches. Okay. Moving on to a new topic, nidre onasim. Okay, and from here we're going to get to another very famous and quite complicated sugya, which we're only going to kind of dabble in a little bit today. We'll get to it in many other cases when we get to it in Shas, a topic called asmachta. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. We're starting with nidre onasim. This is one of the 4 nedarim that is not a valid neder. Nidre, this is the 4th. Nidre onasim. Hidiro chavero sheyochal etzlo. Right? I took a neder that you're going to be forbidden to me if you don't eat. V'chalahu o shechala beno. Okay, and then either, right, you got sick, your son got sick, o she'ira your daughter, o she'kvonahal, or there was a river, a stream in the way and you couldn't get across. Hare elu nidrei onasim. So when you didn't show up to my meal, it wasn't because, right, you ever have it where you're having a Shabbos meal, classic on Shabbat, right? There's no communication and you have a guest and they just don't show up, right? And you don't know what's going on. Did they forget? Did they, right? What happened here? And do they not remember your address? Okay. And turns out you find out later, right? Good, Julie, they have corona or something like that, right? And they just don't have a way to communicate with you. So that's what happened here. That's nidrei onasim. It was beyond your control. The neder is basically never comes into effect. Now the Gemara starts out with a story. This story is going to complicate things for us and raise all sorts of questions. Hahu Gavra, there was a man, the atpis zachvata bebeitin. Let's just assume I was against this guy in court. We had some sort of disagreement between the two of us. He has some proof that he's right, but he thinks he has better proofs, and he goes to find them. He goes out in search of better proofs. So what does he do, though, when he goes to find them? You have to wonder why he does this, and this is why sugya is quite complicated, and there's different opinions here exactly. He took all the documents he had that supported him, his claim against me, and he brings them to the court and leaves them in the hands of the court. Now, if the story ended there, that would make sense. Okay, he's going away. He doesn't want anyone to destroy the evidence. He brings them to the court. However, this next line is very complicated. V'amar, and he says the following declaration: Ilo atina ad taltin yomin. If I don't show up in 30 days, libatlin hane zachvatim. These documents are invalid. Okay, they can't be used. Throw them in the garbage. Okay. Now, what does it sound like? Okay, yes, we learned it about a get. We're going to get there. Okay, we're going to actually bring up the get case. It's a very famous case. It comes up a lot in Shas. Anyway, let's start with this. What's he really trying to say? And this is what asmachta means. Asmachta means that sometimes you say something that you don't really mean. Okay, you don't really mean it. Why? You're just trying to say something to make a point. So this sounds like what he's saying is, I'm so sure that I have better evidence against you, maybe trying to scare me. And he says, if I don't show up in 30 days, they can destroy this evidence because I know I'm showing up within 30 days and I know I'm bringing better proofs. Okay. Did he really mean to destroy it? Doesn't really seem that way, although we're going to see, right? It's not so clear. What happened? He didn't show up in 30 days, but because of onas, he got corona, he got sick, he couldn't show up to court. Amar Rav Huna, batil sachvate. Rav Huna says, no, you would have thought, right, either because of asmachta, which is he didn't really mean what he said, or because it was onas, and it was, right, we've been talking about onas all along. Really, this shouldn't happen. But Rav Huna anyway ruled, destroy the documents. Okay, they can't be admissible in court anymore. So Amalei Rava, the first question against him, Rava comes and says, I don't get it. Anusu, va'anus rachmana patre. It's that very famous line. It comes up in many different sugyot. People are not liable if they were forced into something, if there was some circumstances beyond their control. The Torah basically exempts you. Okay, this comes up if you're watching someone's item, if you're comes up in damages. It's actually a fascinating debate about it within damages. In laws of damages, you're responsible no matter what. Bein ba'ones, bein b'ratzon. Okay, which is weird because onas rachmana patre. And the commentaries, there's a split among the commentaries whether we say, well, it depends how much you were onus. Like, what kind of onus was this? How much beyond your circumstances? And then it's like a percentage gain, possibly. Or others say, well, maybe onus rachmana patre, but not in damages. So there's a whole debate about how to understand this. Anyway, it's a famous thing. We're going to see it lots of times. The simple is, though, it was circumstances beyond their control. You're not held responsible for that. How can you destroy these documents? What's interesting about this is we're going to ask this question and Rav Huna is not going to answer. Okay. So now he says, how do we know onus rachmana patre? Says from the Torah, dichtiv, v'lena'ara lo ta'aseh davar. We have a situation in the Torah where it talks about a woman who's betrothed to be married, right? Which already means she's kind of married, so to speak. She's already forbidden to all other men. Somebody rapes her, right? If someone has relations with her and she was a willing partner, then they both get the death penalty because she was an eshet ish. Again, she wasn't really married, but she was close enough to marry. Anyone learned tubot knows what I'm talking about. If not, it's fine. We'll get to it in other times. But this woman, if she was raped, right, because she screamed and nobody heard her, and then right, we basically know she was raped. Obviously, that's a whole question. How do we know? Anyway, but if she was raped, she doesn't get punished at all. She doesn't get the death penalty because it wasn't her fault. So there you see, ones rachmana patre. That's his proof. Now, well, maybe you'll tell me that was in a death penalty, right? We're going to exempt someone from the death penalty if they were honest, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to exempt them in other ways, like this case. Well, look at our Mishna. What does our Mishna say? Not a life and death situation, right? Whether you're going to be forbidden to benefit from my possessions or not because you didn't show up to lunch. Onasim, you see that ones is a good claim, even in a neder, but it has nothing to do with the death penalty. So that's his question, and we don't really have an answer, okay? Now, later we'll try to understand Rav Huna a little bit better, but he doesn't directly answer this question. Now, before we move back to Rav Huna, we're going to have some questions on Rava. And now we're going to get to the get case. Okay, there's two get cases, and we're going to talk about them right now. So now we'll go to the chart at the bottom of the page. Okay, basically, the question on Rav Huna is ones rachmana patre, right, from Narash onsan, nidrei onsim. Okay, now, they're going to basically say, Rava, they ask, sorry, I lost my place, 4 lines from the bottom. Ula Rava, Mishna, how you're claiming ones rachmana patre, you're claiming nidrei onsim, right? You're quoting us all these sources that everybody knows. But how does that work in with this Mishnah we have in Gittin? We're going to compare it first to the Mishnah in Gittin, and then to another sugya in Gittin. Okay? So, first question is, and then we're going to basically make distinctions between the following cases. Husband says to his wife, says, listen, I'm going abroad for a while. If I don't show up within 12 months, this will be your get. He gives his wife a get, says this will be valid. It will go into, nichnas l'tokef, as they say, it will start working if I don't show up in 12 months. Okay, why did he do this? He does this because, okay, maybe this is kind of going to be the answer, but let's just explain it at this point. We've seen this already a bunch of times. He does this because he doesn't want his wife to do yibum. Okay, they don't have any children, and he's worried that if he dies, his wife will end up marrying the brother, and he's worried he's going away. There's dangers on the road. His boat could sink. His, carriage could get attacked by robbers, and they could kill him, and anything could happen. So he says, if I don't show up, this is a get, and that way you won't have to worry about yibum or chalitza with my brother. Okay, maybe he doesn't want her marrying the brother. She doesn't want to marry the brother. She doesn't want to have to go through the degrading ceremony of chalitza, right? This is a good example of when sometimes spouses are concerned, like they start talking about what's going to happen when I'm no longer there. He wants to protect her. So he says, if I don't show up in 12 months, this will be your get. Now, we assume he wants to stay married to her, right? And he's going to try to show up within 12 months. Maybe it's also his way of saying, I plan to come back within 12 months. And so much so that if I don't, right, this will be your get. And yes, people did this in war also. Okay. Now, what's onus more than death, right? If sickness is onus, then obviously death is onus. It certainly wasn't expected. So he dies within 12 months. Is a get. This is a get. Now, why? If you say ones rachmana patre, right? When he gave this, he wasn't talking about some onus situation that would happen. Now, you might say, what do you mean? he was exactly worried about death, and that's going to be the answer. To which the Gemara says, right, so first they say, this was onus. So they say, you should say, right, what he meant was if I don't show up because I didn't want to come back, and then I'm divorcing you, basically. To which they say, no. Amre, Dilmashane Hatam, here maybe it's different, turning out I'm a bet. If he knew for sure he was going to die, let's say, right, nobody knows this, but had he known theoretically that he was about to die, what would he have done? Min alter of a gomer v'yav he would have given her the get from right at that moment. In other words, he was worried about death, and he was saying, if I die, this will be your get. So that's not considered onus in this case. Onus would be unexpected circumstances. Here, he was within his condition was the concern for an unexpected circumstance of death. So that's why this isn't a good example, because it was specifically meant for that purpose. Okay, whereas a regular case of a neder onasim, I was saying, you're going to eat in my house, otherwise you're going to be forbidden. I wasn't thinking about maybe you'll get sick. To which they ask Rava, second question. Mishna me'ahuda amalahu ilo atina mikan ad taltin yomin lihavigita. Now we're going to have another case with get, but not where the guy dies. Okay, different kind of onus, which you could say he wasn't expecting. Okay, so what happens in this case? The guy says, if I don't come between now and 30 days from now, lihavigita. He gives his wife a get, and he says, this is a get if I don't show up within 30 days. Ata, he comes within 30 days. But what happens? He comes on day number 30. Upaske mabra. What's the problem? There's a river or a stream between the two of them. And there's usually a ferryman who takes people to the other side. And he happens to be on his day off or sick or we don't know what. And he's not there. And the guy gets there and he sees his wife on the other side of the river. And he starts screaming, Amar lahu. He says to them, to people, to anyone who sees him, Chazu datai, I'm trying to get there. Do you see? I'm trying to get there. Look at me. I'm there, even though he's not there. Now he said, this will be your get if I don't show up. And he didn't show up. Now he did show up. He just couldn't get there. So that's onus. Let's see what the law is. For Amar Shmuel, you can already know what the law is, because if we're bringing this to the question of Rava would say onus rachmana patre. It's not his fault. It's considered as if he showed up and the get's not a get. Amar Shmuel, lo shmei matya. This is not considered as if he got to the city. This doesn't work. Okay. Amai, hamenas anus, but he was anus. Why not? So the Gemara has to come up with a different answer. It's actually interesting. In the Sugin Gitin, they basically say, this is a unique halacha by get, and ain ones begitin. Okay? But there's two approaches. Yesh ones begitin, ain ones begitin. By the way, Rava himself is in that sugya and has a whole what to say about it. We'll see when we get there. And there's a whole thing about there's no ones begitin, either because women who are tznuot or women who are prutzot. We're worried about women on both ends of the scale. Right? I'll explain tznuot just to give you an example. I don't want to get too into the sugya there. But for example, the woman might say, well, my husband didn't show up, but he really meant to. He probably something happened. And then what happens? She remains an aguna all her life because she won't use this as her get. So we want to avoid that kind of situation. The prutzot is another different concern anyway. I don't want to get into the whole sugya there. But the point being here that now the Gemara didn't answer ain ones begitin here, which would have been a good answer. But that's because there's a machloket. Do you hold ones begitin or don't you hold ones begitin? And if you hold there is ones begitin, you need a different answer. Okay, so now they're going to give a different answer for that. There's some of the commentaries say that's why they give a different answer here, because there's a debate there about whether you can hold ones beget or not. So now they say this is a different type of onus than the other ones. Why? Dilma onse de megalia shani. This was a very obvious onus. Okay, what does that mean, obvious onus? It's kind of an oxymoron. An onus is unexpected circumstances. What they're saying is this is within unexpected circumstances. This was somewhat expected. Okay, the ferryman is not always there all day long. And it's possible that you would show up, right, and he wouldn't be there. And therefore what, right? Mabra migle onse. In other words, first they say it would be different if it was a clear onus possibility, if this was a possibility. And then they say in the ma'aval, this crossing, the ferry, is a migle onse. It was an obvious, expected type of onus. And therefore, he should have been expected when he said, if I don't come within 30 days, he should have said, if I don't come to, let's say, across the river, right? He should have said, expecting that might happen and he might end up at the last minute and get stuck. He should have included that in his stipulation. And since he didn't, therefore, we don't count this as onus he obviously was saying only if I actually physically show up there. And he didn't physically show up. Okay, so what we did was, again, just to review using the chart, we took this scenario where we have Rava, who basically said, questioning Rav Huna and saying, why on earth did you say they could get rid of those documents? He was anus. He didn't show up because of some onus reason. And therefore, right, I forget what the case was. He got sick or something. Let me just remember. Right, idness. It doesn't say what. He just didn't show up for some honest reason. Why? Anus Rahman Patre. And then they said, Rava, if you hold Anus Rahman Patre all the time, why in the get case where the guy says, right, if I don't come within 12 months, that's because death was included in his if I don't come. That's not really considered onus in that case. And if I don't come within 30 days, it will be a get. That's also not really considered onus because it's an onus. It's an unexpected circumstance that was somewhat expected. And therefore, he should have included it. The fact that he didn't include it means he doesn't mean I'm going to show up across the river and not get across. He means I'm actually going to show up physically to where you are. And if he doesn't, well, he didn't fulfill his condition. So that was a question on Rava that we got into because he asked a question on Rav Huna. Now we're going to have another question on Rav Huna. Okay, so here comes the question on Rav Huna. Ule Rav Huna, we have another problem. First, we said it's onus, an onus Rahman Patre, and we didn't bring an answer. Second question is, and I told you we get to this issue of asmachta, michti asmachtahi, asmachta lo kanya. This is asmachta. What is asmachta? So it's a good question. What is asmachta? It's a very hard term to define. Comes up in a bunch of sugyot, and the commentaries all try to come up with explanations exactly what is asmachta based on the sugyot. One of the main sugyot where it comes up is gambling. A gambler is not allowed to be a witness for two possible reasons. One is only if he's a full-time gambler, and then he's not believed because we assume, right, he doesn't have a livelihood and he's willing to do a quick fix for money, and therefore will be happy to take your money to lie in court if that's all he does, and say, he's not part of the regular world of having a normal job, and therefore there's a concern he'll lie. But some people say it's anyone who gambles, anyone who's ever gambled in their life cannot be a witness. Why? Because gambling is a form of asmachta. What does that mean? When you put asmachta means that you never really meant to do what you did, okay? Or you never really meant to say what you said. When I go to a casino, what's my goal? To make money, right? So when I put money down on the table, I buy chips, right? And then I play my chips. I don't really ever mean to lose. And the casino people never really intend to lose their money either. Otherwise, why would they be in business? Right? So that means when they put money and give me money, and when I put my money and give it to someone else, they never really buy it. It's stolen, basically. I'm taking stolen money because the person, what does it mean stolen? The person didn't want to give it to me. So if the casino really doesn't want to lose their money and I walk out with money, I've stolen money. And that puts me in the case of a thief, and thieves are not allowed to be witnesses. Fascinating way of looking at it. So asmachta means that you never really, even though you said, okay, I put my money down as if I'm willing to lose it, but I'm not really willing to lose it. Okay? I didn't really mean what I said. And asmachta lo kanya. First of all, we're going to see there's a machloket. Is it kona? Is it not kona? That's a whole debate in and of itself. But right now they're saying, when the guy I was up against in court, he came and said, if I don't show up within 30 days, cancel these documents. As I explained in the beginning, all he was trying to say was, I've got really good proof and I'm going to show you. And so much so that I'm going to say this ridiculous statement. It's a total exaggeration. Some people say that asmachta has to be an exaggerated statement, that it's so exaggerated that basically get rid of all my evidence. If I don't show up, who in their right mind would say, get rid of evidence that I have that's good for me, right? So when he said that, he obviously didn't mean it. It's asmachta, and asmachta lo kanya, which means that his statement was a meaningless statement. And they certainly shouldn't destroy his documents based on what he said, because he didn't mean it. To which they say, first answer, well, the court is already holding it in their hands. It's not like I made some ridiculous statement without backing it up, but I actually handed over my documents physically to the court, which means that on the one hand, my statements, or again, not me, this guy who's against me, his statements seemed ridiculous. On the other hand, if he wanted to remain in the world of ridiculous, he would have just said, to his wife, like in front of his wife, you can go destroy these documents or something, or someone to his neighbor, you come into my house and destroy them if I don't show up. But the fact that he brought them to court shows that he was giving the court jurisdiction to basically cancel them. It meant he was serious. Okay, anyone who does something in court, also, they don't even say court at this point. Later, though, you'll see court. But right now, it's just that someone else is holding them, which means he gave up his rights to them, which means he was willing to get rid of them. To which the Gemara says, is that really a criteria? Does that override asmachta? You're going to say asmachta doesn't apply if you hand it over to someone else? Okay, again, we're not assuming court here. We're just assuming anyone. It didn't say court. Avahatzna, one of the classic cases of asmachta is this. I owe you $100. You have a document. Usually you keep the document that I owe you money, because then you can always claim it. But I paid you 50. Now we're stuck. What do we do with the document? If you keep it in your hands, you can claim all 100. If I keep it in my hands, then you can't claim anything. So what did we do? I said, I gave it to a third party. I said, you hold this document. That guy knows that I paid half, and he knows that, right, I still owe half. So it's perfect for both of us. But I make the following statement. I give it to this person. And then Amal, I said, if I don't give him this document, if I don't pay you the money back, I'm so sure I'm going to pay you the money, and I'm trying to tell you, don't worry, you'll get your $50. If I don't pay you within the next 30 days, this third party, I say to him, you can give the shtar back to you. Okay, you can return it to the borrower, to the loaner, the lender. Because and again, this is asmachta. It's asmachta, but it's in a case where I already handed over the document. It's true, it wasn't exactly mine to hand over, but I did hand over the document. It wasn't fully mine, it was partially mine because I did pay half of it. What happens when the time comes? Now we're going to see, is this asmachta? Is it not asmachta? So what we're looking for is someone else is holding the document and we still rule this asmachta and asmachta lo kanya. So that's what we're going to see here. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yitain. Rabbi Yossi says that person can give the shtar back to you, okay, because he holds asmachta kanya. Meaning asmachta is effective according to Rabbi Yossi. I told you it's a machloket. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yitain. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can't give that shtar back because I never really meant what I said. It's asmachta. I was just trying to make myself look good. I'm definitely going to pay you back. But of course, why would I ever want to return the document to you? You'll collect what you already collected. There's no way I really meant that. We're still continuing here. And the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi, who holds asmachta is kanya. So what do we see here? This is asmachta, and we hold like Rabbi Yehuda, the asmachta lo kanya. So back to Rav Huna, why is your case not the same thing? Where obviously the person really didn't mean what they were saying. To which the Gemara says, Shane hacha dilivatel zachvate. This is a term that's actually a big debate among the commentaries, actually how to read this, but like what this means. But basically, because I gave this to the court and I said to them, the other guy against me said, I'm giving you my documents and I'm giving up my rights to them, you basically relinquished your rights. And the way they understand it, again, there's a big debate. The way some people understand this is, this leaves the realm of asmachta. It's more a case of hoda'at ba'al. If you're basically giving up your documents to the court and saying that if I don't find better ones, you can destroy these, you're basically admitting, again, it's hard to understand why the person did this in the first place. And that's why there's all sorts of interpretations. In the end, they must be saying that these documents are really, right, they're not true. And he's basically admitting to me that unless I find better proof, I really don't have a case. And that these documents maybe are forged documents or something else. And it's what we call, it goes into the realm. Again, some people read it this way. There's a debate about how to read this exactly. Hoda'at ba'al din. It's more like when the person said that, they were admitting that they really have no case. Okay, as opposed to what we said the first time, where they were so confident that they have a good case. Maybe they're really saying, we really don't have a case. And that's where they're willing to say to the court. Otherwise, why would they be willing to say, destroy my documents? Okay, so it's not because they handed it over. That wouldn't be enough to say asmachta lo kanya. It's basically because asmachta is lo kanya, even in the case where you handed over your documents, and therefore it must be something else is going on here, and it's not a classic case of asmachta. Okay, again, something else, which is a bit amorphous and not exactly clear what that something else is, but that's a possibility. Okay, so now Now we're going to have halacha l'maaseh here, hilchata, which I have to say already is not exactly clear what all of this means also, okay, because you're going to see from other asmachta cases, it's not so clear. And some people, it says here, hilchata asmachta kanya. The halacha is asmachta is koneh, like Rabbi Yossi, against what the Gemara there said, right, that we quoted here about this case of hishlish taro, where we said we don't hold like, right? But, right, Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav Huna, in the name of Rav, we don't hold like Rabbi Yossi. Here they say we do hold like Rabbi Yossi, but under certain conditions. And then there's also a debate about whether, right, to what extent do we hold by asmachta is a good question. It's not clear. V'hu de lo anis, number one, there has to be no onus involved in this asmachta, right? No forcing of anyone, no circumstances beyond anyone's control. V'hu de kanu minei bebeitin chashuv. And maybe this is the way they're understanding Rav Huna, that he gave it to a court, right? If you give it to an important court, they say here, it has to be an important court. But if you gave it to an, right, asmachta is kona in a case where, number one, there's no extenuating, right, unexpected circumstances. And number two, it's where you actually did some sort of kinyan, where you picked up a handkerchief, or you did something of significance. In this case, you handed over your documents to a beit in chashuv. If you did it in a court that was important, then asmachta would actually be kona. So while it starts us saying that we hold asmachta kanya, it seems very limited, because you would have to have handed over something into a court that was an important court, not just any court, but an important court. Obviously, where you draw the line, what's important, what's not important, is also subject to debate. Then, since you would say, right, since you did it in a beit in chashuv, then it would be valid. Okay, could be you're asking what a beit in chashuv. I'm just thinking out loud. It could be, you could gather any three people and they could be called a court. So it might be not a gathering of any random three people, but an actual court that generally sits and presides in court. Could be. Okay, so basically we had this case of Rav Huna, where he basically said, we're going to destroy these documents, even though the person was anus. We have Rava's questions against him, anus rachona patre. Then we came back to Rava and said, but if you say anus rachona patre, what about these two get cases? Even though they could have answered ein onus begitin, they don't answer that. They say, even if you hold yesh onus begitin, in these cases, we're not going to accept onus, each one for their own reasons. And then we went into how could Rav Huna say this? Isn't it asmachta? We tried to say maybe it's not asmachta if you already pass it over to someone else. We proved that wasn't true. In the end, we say it must be something unique here, which again is open to interpretation, why it's unique. But somehow he already relinquished his rights to these documents, right? In wording, he canceled them. He said they're going to be canceled. And somehow there was something in that maybe it was a way of admitting, again, always trying to think about what this person was doing and why would he do such a thing. Maybe it was really just admitting, I really don't have a case. Even though we understood the case totally differently in the beginning, there was this overconfidence and I clearly have a case. Maybe he really meant to say, I don't really have a case. Maybe he's trying to scare us into thinking that he does, but really knowing that he didn't. Okay, ending now with the next Mishnah. Just to start, teaser to the next Mishnah. We're only going to get started, but a fascinating teaser. Nedarim laharagim ulacharamim ulemuchsim. Three categories of people here. Okay, again, there's some different interpretations, but either a murderer, okay, you can make a neder to a murderer, or a thief, okay, a haram. Some people think it's a thief. You can read Shuli Mishkan's article about tax collectors today, which is the muchsim. And she says it's a fraud and claims the other people are these are all different terms for different types of tax collectors. Shehi truma, afa pisha ena truma. You can make a neder. Somebody comes to your house, either to murder you, to steal from you, or to take taxes from you. Again, depending on how you understand these terms. And he wants to take something of yours, right? He's got a gun to your head. Give me your food. And you say, oh, you want that? That's truma. Fascinating to think that will convince this person, oh, I won't take it if it's truma. Okay, that's a whole interesting question in of itself, right? These are people who, keep certain halachas, but obviously are missing the point. Anyway, by tax collectors, you can read Shuli's article. It's very interesting. She talks about, tax collectors are always seen as the enemy. In fact, they're also not believable as witnesses, apropos our discussion today about the gamblers, because they often, and which kind of tax collectors we're talking about, that's what she talks about in the article. It's very good. These different options of who they are. They're obviously Jewish. They obviously keep halachas of truma, but they're also taking advantage when they take taxes to take things that they're not supposed to take. So you can basically take a false vow, lie to them, and say this is truma, alpha pi she'ena truma, even though it's not truma. She'en shel beit hamelech, you could say, oh, this is the king's property. It's not mine. King's property is not subject to taxes, or maybe if they're going to come steal from you, they're not going to steal something that belongs to the king. Okay, then we'll see. Shamai, can you do this? Can you even swear or only a vow? We'll get to that tomorrow. But certain cases we actually allow you to lie, and we'll get talking more about that tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone.